Nothing like a good latte. What's up, beautiful people? So today we're talking about the fundamentals of photography. So this video today is a very basic and general introduction to the 10 rules of photography that I think you should know. Like, if this video was out when I started shooting photography, it would have made my learning process and learning curve so much easier. So much easier. So we're gonna break it down into 3 categories, being first, your camera, secondly, lighting, and lastly, composition. And I'm gonna kind of break down what each of those categories mean, and then also the subcategories that you should focus on when first starting out your photography career. Okay, so the first topic we'll be talking about is your camera settings. So if you're a photographer, we can't shoot without our camera. So understanding the basics of what our camera does and what happens when the different settings change and how they affect the image is pivotal to understanding how to get a particular look that you're going for. So understanding what ISO is. ISO is basically how sensitive your sensor is to light. So the higher the ISO, the more sensitive to light your sensor is, but also there's a side effect to that. And that means also the higher ISO, the more grain you're going to bring into your picture. But nowadays, with how good technology is coming, we can push the limits on how high our cameras can go. Secondly, understanding what your aperture is. So understanding how your aperture affects the depth of field, or quote unquote that bokeh, that blurry background that we all like. Understanding the importance, how to get that and when to use it, and then when not to use it. The third thing that we want to focus on is our shutter. So understanding how our shutter speed affects our image is very important as well. If you guys have ever seen images where there are light trails, that effect is typically created with a slow shutter speed. And also understanding when not to use a slow shutter, especially when shooting sports. That's typically why you have seen in the past that sports photographers always rave about the 1DX Mark II, or I'm pretty sure the 1DX Mark III, but then also now the R3 that is coming out because of the high shutter speed. Being able to have a camera that shoots higher frame rates allows, or at a high shutter, allows for the photographer to capture subjects that are moving at a high rate. So typically why you see sports photographers or photographers who shoot, like NASCAR or, sporting events, they typically resort to a camera like the 1DX Mark II that can shoot at a high shutter speed, allowing them to be able to quickly capture multiple shots quickly to keep up with the movement of their subject. So understanding shutter is very important as well. So the next category that you want to focus on is picture formats. So understanding the different picture formats will make your editing process a lot easier. Trust. So there are typically 2 major picture formats that DSLR is shooting, and that's RAW and JPEg. There also are different variations of JPEg, but that's another topic and discussion for later. So the main difference between RAW and JPEG is that JPEG is typically, or has more so been explained as shooting a image with a filter on it and then trying to go back and edit that filter, whereas RAW is basically working with a blank canvas. And that comes down to basically the amount of information that is stored within that photo. So when shooting RAW, it's basically having the most amount of information stored in that photo that allows you, when you later go on into your editing process, to be able to manipulate that photo and bring out the certain colors and features that you want to focus on. So understanding picture formats for you and your editing process is also very important. Okay, next is lighting. So lighting is very important. If you guys look up the definition of photography, it's basically the art of shaping light. So without light, there's no photography. And so being able to understand how to use light effectively and understanding how to shape light is also important. But understanding how to shape light comes with your progression of your skill set and is a skill that you're always learning here in photography. But the main thing that I want to focus on or suggest that you focus on is understanding how to nail your exposure. So being able to identify when light is too harsh and then being able to identify when light is perfect and soft around your subject, and then being able to identify when you may need a little extra source of light. So being able to understand when you have too much light, not enough light, and then just enough amounts of light is important. So secondly, we want to focus on the different temperatures of light. So if you guys have ever heard of photographers mention Kelvin, they're referring to the temperature of a light. So on the Kelvin spectrum, in which the temperature of light is measured, we have very warm, and then we also have very cool. And then somewhere in the middle is where you want to be to make sure that your image looks as natural as possible. So the third and final subject that I will focus on is composition. Now when it comes down to composition, there are a number of different rules and tips and tricks to focus on when composing your image, but the main ones that I will focus on are framing. So understanding how to position your subject in a particular frame of your image to draw focus for the viewer to the subject. And that's mainly seen by, like, right now, how you can see that I'm framed in between this wall here and then also the pictures here. You automatically draw focus directly to me because everything else is kind of shaped around me and what I'm doing. And then secondly, the next thing that I will focus on are leading lines. So leading lines are very important as well because naturally when looking at an image, our eyes gravitate to that leading line and typically just follow wherever that line is forcing us to look at. So similar to these images here, but then also similar to this framing here as well. As you can see with the photos here to my side, the top framing of the photos and then also the bottom framing of the photos, they kind of draw your eyes into the middle of the frame as well. So understanding leading lines and how they affect your image and draw your viewers' attention to a specific location of your photo is important as well. And then lastly, one thing that I will focus on is understanding depth. Depth allows for your image to be stacked with multiple layers of information, and but also being able to use it and manipulate the depth of an image to focus in one general area. So if you think about a photo or what we see in our everyday lives, we have generally something that's very close to us, which is our foreground, and then we have something that's in focus, which is our midground, and then we have something further behind that, which is the background. So there are three elements to a photo, and then understanding how to position certain elements in each midground, foreground, and background allows you to be able to manipulate the viewer's focus and draw their attention to one central location. So as of right now, as you can see, I'm pretty much centered here in the foreground for you, and then I have additional information behind me for the midground, and then also we have everything further in the back by the stand and the light as the background information. Hey Siri, stop music. So there you have it. Those are my 10 tips and tricks on the topics that I think you should focus on as a beginning photographer to help you take better photos, but also to help you tell a story through your images. So if this video was helpful in any way, make sure to hit that like button. And if you aren't already, make sure to subscribe with post notifications on to be notified for future videos. Until next time, peace.